The night had fallen a long time ago, and I was back on the Pacific Highway again. I'm a truck driver, and that road is like my second home. But, man, there's something strange in the air up there. The sky was clear, the first signs of stars appearing, and all I could think about was reaching my destination soon. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more chilling stories. Let's unravel this mystery together. The only company I had was my radio, which always played some old songs or that country music that stuck in my head. But suddenly, the music started to fail. The sound faded in and out, and instead of notes, an odd interference appeared. Then whispers that seemed to call my name. Jonas, Jonas. I swear I wasn't losing it. I looked round, expecting to see a car or something, but it was just me and the road. Then I remembered the stories I always hear about people disappearing on the Pacific Highway. They say those who pass through there never come back. A heavy feeling started to take over me, but I tried to ignore it. I kept thinking, just one more trip, just a few more hours on the road. When it was time to stop, I made a pit stop at the first gas station I saw. It was a somewhat isolated place, with flickering lights and a strange atmosphere. The guys who were there were a bit weird, with stares that seemed to stick to me. "You're the truck driver who's always round here, right?" One of them asked. How did he know me? I didn't remember seeing those guys before. I tried to make small talk, but the tension in the air was palpable. The place looked clean, but it had a feeling of abandonment, as if that gas station held dark secrets. The attendant looked at me again and said that the night could be treacherous on the road. I laughed nervously, but it wasn't funny. The mood had already changed. I got back in the truck, started the engine, and continued forward. But everything felt stranger with each kilometer I passed. The road, which once felt familiar, now seemed to hide something from me. I turned off the radio, but the whispers still echoed in my head. And so, I drove on, unaware that this journey was just beginning. Continuing the drive, the road seemed darker, and what once comforted me now left me uneasy. I looked in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something, but it was just darkness behind me. The only light was from the headlights, illuminating a stretch of road that didn't seem to clear anything. It was as if the night was closing in. That's when the radio decided to come back to life. But instead of normal songs, those voices echoed again. Jonas, Jonas, I shivered. It was as if someone was really talking to me, and I couldn't quite understand what they were saying. I tried to turn up the volume to catch something clearer, but it only got worse. The interference was horrible, and the whispers just grew louder and more distorted. I slammed my hand on the dashboard in frustration. Shut up, stop it. The radio fell silent, but the feeling inside the truck was that something wasn't right. I looked outside again, and my heart almost stopped. I noticed figures by the side of the road. I couldn't see them clearly, but they were dark shapes, almost like shadows. I tried to see if there was something clearer, but as soon as I looked, they vanished as if they had never been there. I thought it was just my mind, but a knot in my stomach told me I was wrong. I started to speed up a little, trying to leave everything behind. But the more I accelerated, the more engulfed I felt by the night. The path seemed to stretch on, and it had no end. I reached a point where I decided to stop and take a look round. I needed to calm down. I parked in a rest area that seemed abandoned. The lighting was dim, and the sounds of nature only heightened the pressure. I got out of the truck and looked round. The silence was deafening, and suddenly, a snap. I turned round and saw a shadow moving among the trees. My instinct screamed for me to return to the truck, but something held me there. Jonas, you're a truck driver. You can't be scared, I told myself. I focused on what I had to do. I went back to the truck and turned on the radio again, trying to distract myself. But the tension was in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I just wanted to go home. But the farther I got, the more trapped I felt in the strangeness of that night. And the road continued. I sat in the truck, the engine running, and tried to breathe deeply to calm down. The radio spoke again, but the music was no longer the same. It was a mix of static and those whispers, and I could no longer ignore it. The feeling that something was wrong was so strong that it started to drive me insane. I decided to put the truck in gear and move forward. I needed to get away from that rest area. As soon as I pressed the accelerator, a dense fog began to cover the road. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The headlights illuminated a stretch of about 3 meters ahead, and the rest was just white, as if the road had disappeared. As I drove, silence also took over. I could only hear the engine and the static of the radio. The tension in the air was so heavy that it felt like I could touch it. My eyes were glued to the road, and I was trying not to let my mind spiral. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw something flash, a shadow. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. It was as if I was being watched, and that made me uneasy. A car appeared behind me. I thought, finally, someone on the road. But as I turned to look, the car vanished, as if it evaporated in the fog. My heart raced again. My brain began to run at a crazy speed, and I didn't know if this was real or if I was dreaming. I decided to try to ignore everything and accelerated more, but the road seemed like a trap. With every curve I took, every kilometer I drove, the situation only got stranger. I even heard a noise, a metal creaking, and the atmosphere turned tense again. Then, in the middle of the fog, I saw something parked on the shoulder. It was a figure. I couldn't distinguish what it was, but it looked human, with its body turned towards me, motionless. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. I thought about stopping and asking if everything was okay, but a part of me screamed not to do it. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, frozen in time. I looked ahead to maintain my focus. I gathered my courage and reached the road's edge, trying to speed past that thing. As I approached, the figure turned in my direction. Its eyes seemed empty and lifeless. A chill ran down my spine. I had to swerve. I opted to take a smaller path that I noticed. All I wanted was distance, but this path felt like a trap. The road was full of potholes, and with every bump, the tension grew. I looked at the dashboard, and suddenly, the fuel light started flashing. No, not now. The truck began to falter, and the only thought running through my head was, I can't stop. I can't stop. The fog was getting denser, and all I wanted was for this nightmare to end. And so, I continued into the darkness, my heart in my throat, unsure of what else the night had in store for me. The truck began to lose power, and the dashlight was flickering faster and faster. I tried to stay calm, knowing that I didn't have much fuel left and the fog only heightened the tension. The road seemed to go on forever, and every time I looked ahead, I only saw that maddening mist. Suddenly, pure tension turned into panic. The engine sputtered, and I knew it wasn't going to hold up much longer. Damn it, I shouted. I looked in the rearview mirror again, and when I did, I saw that figure from before, now much closer. That wasn't normal. My heart raced, and adrenaline surged through my body. I glanced ahead again and decided I wouldn't look back anymore. I just needed to reach somewhere I could stop and ask for help. The fog was getting so thick that I could barely see the road, only the lights of the truck attempting to cut through that white mass. I saw a light in the distance. It was so bright that I thought it was a gas station or something. I encouraged myself, It's going to be there. It's going to be there. I accelerated the truck, but the direction was changing, the ground uneven. It was as if I had entered a maze. As I approached, I realized it wasn't a gas station. It was a big old house that looked like it had come out of a horror movie. The windows were broken, and the light was flickering, as if it were beckoning. I didn't want to stop, but I had no choice. Without fuel, the truck would stall, and the thought of being out on the road frightened me even more. I parked, turned off the engine, and took a look round. The house seemed forgotten. The air was heavy, and I didn't know if I should go in or just return to the truck and wait for something to happen. I put my head outside, looking round, and the only thing I could hear was the wind blowing between the trees. I took a deep breath and decided I needed assistance. I started walking toward the front door. With every step, the feeling that something was behind me grew stronger, as if someone or something was watching me. I knocked on the door, but there was no response. I asked if anyone was there, but only the echo of my voice replied. The door was ajar. I didn't know whether to push it open or turn back. I ended up pushing it and stepping inside. The place was so dark I could barely see. The smell of mold and old would send chills down my spine. Everything seemed covered in dust, and the weak light made the shadows dance in a bizarre way. I walked a little further and heard a noise coming from one of the rooms, like something was moving. Curiosity overtook fear. I edged closer to the sound, and as I managed to see the source, I realized it was just a window slamming shut in the wind. But something about the atmosphere felt strange. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A little relieved, I pulled it out to see if it was a message or a call. Anything. But what I saw was my own face on the screen. My jaw locked. Desperation took over. I wasn't sure if I was awake or if this was all an hallucination. And at that moment, I realized that the house, the fog, that strange night, everything was intertwined in a way I couldn't explain. I looked back at the door, wondering if it was still the best way out. Everything in my mind screamed for me to leave. But I was caught between fear and the need to understand what was happening. I stood there, staring at my phone as if it were the answer to everything. My face on the screen seemed to stare back at me, almost challenging. I silenced the voices in my head and put the device away, still unsure of what to do. The sound inside continued, and the atmosphere grew heavy. I thought about taking one last look at the door and leaving, but something seemed to be pulling me inside. I advanced a little more into the house. The walls were stained, and the weak light made everything look even more sinister. With each step, I heard creaks and cracks, as if the house itself were alive, trying to warn me. It was then that I entered a room that seemed to have been left alone for a long time. There was a dusty sofa covered in dust, and various items scattered on the floor. On a table, I saw a yellowed piece of paper. I walked over and picked it up, trying to see what was written. The letters were almost illegible, but I could identify a few words. Don't look back and stay away from the road. The feeling that wrapped round me at that moment was one of despair. What did it mean not to look back? What was this? While I was processing this, the sound I heard earlier intensified and seemed to be coming from upstairs. My body begged me to leave, but I couldn't. It was as if an invisible thread kept me bound to that place. I decided I needed to understand what was going on, even though I knew it was a risky move. I climbed the creaking stairs. The air upstairs was even heavier. I checked each room one by one, but everything was empty, until I reached a closed door. A chill ran down my spine as I approached. The door seemed different, as if something was hidden inside. I grabbed the knob and slowly opened it. Inside, the room was intact, as if someone lived there. There was a neatly made bed and a desk with a lit candle. Who uses a candle nowadays? I thought, I looked closer and noticed there were photos on the wall. Photos of people I didn't recognize. But in all of them, there was a pattern. They all seemed to be looking back, as if they were waiting for someone to arrive. The strangeness became even more intense. As I stared at the photos, a cold breeze passed, and the candle extinguished. The darkness made my heart race even faster. I heard footsteps in the hallway behind me. It was as if something was approaching. There was no more time to think. My instinct for survival kicked in. I bolted for the stairs. I rushed down the stairs, almost tripping. All I wanted was to get out of that house and back on the road. When I reached the door, I heard a whisper. "Jonas." The voice was soft yet terrifying. I froze by the door, my hand on the doorknob. But I didn't look back. "I can't look," I kept repeating to myself. I opened the door and stepped outside, the moonlight giving me a slight sense of relief. The fog was still thick, but now it seemed a little clearer. I looked at the truck, which was there, and thought I had finally found a way to escape. But what I saw on the road paralyzed me. The figure was there again, waiting. Adrenaline surged again. "Stop, Jonas. Just get in the truck and leave," I thought. I climbed in, turned on the engine, and accelerated. The figure stayed behind, and I could still hear that whisper echoing in my head. But a part of me knew that, from what I had seen, this wasn't over yet. The road continued, and all I wanted was distance. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for a more chilling story.